What happens when authority meets truth and refuses to recognize it? Why do those who study Scripture the most sometimes miss the one it points to? And what does it reveal when confidence replaces curiosity in the search for God? The festival was ending, but the tension was not. The streets were still filled with movement, but something had shifted. The crowd had been divided over Jesus. Some believed, some questioned, some argued. But now the focus turns to the leaders. The Pharisees and chief priests were waiting. They had sent temple guards to arrest Jesus. They expected a report, they expected obedience, they expected results. But what they received instead was silence. The guards returned without him. And when the leaders saw them, they immediately demanded answers. Why didn't you bring him in? There is frustration in that question. Authority expects control, systems expect compliance, power expects execution. But the guards replied with a sentence that changed the atmosphere completely. No one ever spoke the way this man does. That is not an excuse, that is an encounter. In that moment, something had happened to them. They went to arrest a man, but instead they encountered truth, and truth interrupted their assignment. This is where the story becomes deeper than conflict, because now it is not just about Jesus and the crowd. It is about Jesus and the system. The leaders react immediately. They don't try to understand, they don't ask questions, they don't pause to reflect on what the guards experienced. Instead, they respond with dismissal. You mean he has deceived you also? There is no curiosity in their words. Only control, only assumption, only certainty. And that certainty becomes the barrier. Because when someone believes they already have all the answers, they stop listening, they stop questioning, they stop seeing. The leaders continue saying that no one of the rulers or Pharisees believes in him, but then they add something revealing. They know nothing of the law. This crowd that knows nothing of the law, there is a curse on them. In that statement, a divide becomes visible. Us versus them, knowledge versus ignorance, authority versus crowd. But something is missing: humility, the very thing that allows truth to be recognized. One of the leaders, however, speaks differently. Nicodemus. He is the one who had previously gone to Jesus at night. He quietly raises a question. He does not defend Jesus outright. He simply asks for fairness. Does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he has been doing? It is a simple question. But in that environment, even a simple question feels like disruption. Because systems built on certainty do not welcome inquiry. They prefer agreement, not examination, not reflection. And so Nicodemus is immediately dismissed. They respond sharply. Are you from Galilee too? Look into it and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee. And just like that, the conversation ends. But the issue does not. Because what is happening here is not just disagreement about a man, it is resistance to truth that does not fit expectation. The leaders had studied the scriptures. They knew the laws. They were trained in interpretation. They held authority over religious understanding. And yet, when truth stood in front of them, they rejected it. This creates a difficult question. How can someone be so close to truth and still miss it? The answer is not lack of knowledge. It is the way knowledge is held. When knowledge becomes pride, when understanding becomes identity, when position becomes protection, then truth becomes a threat instead of a guide. The guards had no theological training. They had no authority, but they were open, and openness allowed them to recognize something the leaders could not. No one ever spoke like this man. That statement carries weight, because it is not about argument, it is about recognition, something deeper than logic, something beyond debate, something that reaches the human heart before the mind can organize it. And that is where the difference lies. The leaders were analyzing Jesus. The guards experienced him. One approached truth from distance. The other encountered it directly. And that changes everything. The leaders believed they were protecting truth, but in reality, they were protecting their interpretation of truth. And when interpretation becomes more important than reality, truth itself is rejected when it does not conform. This is not just a historical moment. It reflects something timeless. Because even today, it is possible to know about God without recognizing him. It is possible to study scripture and still miss its meaning. It is possible to hold religious position and still resist spiritual truth, not because truth is unclear, but because the heart is closed. This passage does not attack knowledge. It challenges certainty without openness. It challenges authority without humility. It challenges belief without willingness to listen. Nicodemus stands as a contrast in this moment. He does not fully declare belief, but he refuses to accept injustice without inquiry. That small act of questioning becomes significant, because sometimes truth begins not with answers, but with the courage to ask a better question. Should we not hear him first? It is a question that slows the system. It interrupts certainty. It creates space, and space is where truth can be considered. But the leaders are not interested in space. They are interested in control, so they shut it down. And yet, something has already been exposed. The guards have encountered something they cannot forget. The leaders have revealed something they refuse to examine, and the crowd remains in the middle, watching, listening, deciding. This creates a layered picture of human response to truth. Some encounter it and are transformed. Some analyze it and resist it. Some stand in between and hesitate. And the difference is not intelligence. It is posture of the heart, whether it is open or closed. Jesus is not physically present in this part of the passage, but his presence is still felt in every conversation, in every question, in every reaction. Even in his absence, he is the center of attention. That itself is significant, because truth does not need constant visibility to remain powerful. It continues to influence even when not physically present. It continues to confront even when not speaking. And here, the reaction to him reveals more about the leaders than about him. They are confident, but not curious, certain, but not reflective, defensive, but not open. And that becomes their limitation, because certainty without humility can become blindness. Meanwhile, those who encountered him directly were changed, not because they had more knowledge, but because they were willing to be interrupted. There is a quiet lesson in that contrast. Sometimes the greatest barrier to truth is not ignorance. It is the refusal to be interrupted, to let something challenge what we already assume, to allow experience to question expectation, to accept that we might not have everything figured out. The temple guards return with no prisoner, but they return with something far more significant, a realization, an encounter, a disruption of assumption, and that disruption spreads beyond them. Because now the leaders must respond not only to Jesus, but to the fact that others are being affected by him. And that creates tension. When systems are challenged by lived experience, they face a choice: deny it or reconsider. The leaders choose denial. But the story does not end there. Because truth is not dependent on acceptance to remain true. It continues to move. It continues to reach hearts. It continues to divide perception. Some will see him as a deceiver, others as a teacher, some as a threat, others as hope, and some will remain undecided. But none can ignore him, and that is the reality this passage reveals. Jesus does not force belief, but he creates response, and every response reveals something deeper within the person responding. As we reflect on this moment, it raises questions that are not just historical, but personal. How do we respond when truth challenges what we already believe? Do we dismiss it quickly? Do we defend our position immediately? Or do we pause long enough to listen? Because sometimes the difference between missing truth and recognizing it is not intelligence. It is willingness. Willingness to hear, willingness to reconsider, willingness to be wrong. The leaders in this passage had authority, but authority without openness became limitation. The guards had no authority, but openness led them to recognition. And that contrast remains relevant. Because truth is not only about what is known, it is about how it is received. As the festival concludes, the tension remains unresolved. No final agreement, no unified understanding, just division, reflection, and decision. And in that space, every reader is invited to consider their own response, not to the crowd, not to the leaders, but to Jesus. Because that is where the real question lies. Not what others believe, but what you will do with what you have seen, what you have heard, what you have encountered, and whether you are willing to let truth speak, even when it disrupts certainty. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.